the story with this wholesale investor test? What sort of trouble are you causing down there at Treasury?
So the wholesale investor test is having a look at that as part of the terms of reference for the managed investment scheme review.
Right.
So that was announced in October 2022. The wholesale investment test is important to managed investment schemes because for most schemes to be able to be applied to retail investors, they have to be registered, and then under the Courts Act there's a whole bunch of different things that apply around governance to those kinds of schemes. It's also relevant to the consumer protections for retail investors. So this threshold has not been reviewed since it was first put in place in 2001. And so the terms of reference seem to ask us to have a look to see whether it's still the right threshold.
So is this something the government proposes to do, Minister?
The review's still in process. We haven't handed our report yet to government, so we're still it's still in process. There's no advice yet for government to act on.
Okay. I mean, given the appalling enforcement record of ASIC, do you think it would make much difference if more people were treated as retail clients for the purposes of the law?
So I'm obviously not going to make any comment about the performance of ASIC.
Why not?
But I will say that the consumer protections have recently been strengthened quite considerably, and so it is important to look at whether the threshold is still right for retail investors given the strength of consumer protections around design and distribution, around dispute resolution. So it's about looking at consumer protections and whether the settings are still right given the managed investment scheme rules were first put in place in 1998. There hasn't been a government-led review of this for over 20 years. So
was there a review in 2011 into this?
So there has been a number of reviews. This is about the government-led review. So there's been reviews by different organisations, but this is the first government-led one.
In my understanding, there was a wholesale retail client review in 2021.
So in terms of previous
2011.
reviews, 2011. There was... Sorry.
I can table that if you like. But you've got that...
So
review?
there was a review by the Corporations and Markets Advisory Committee in 2012. And then there's been some parliamentary inquiries since then. The PJC inquiry in 2009 after Timbercorp and Great Southern. There was a PJC inquiry into the collapse of Trio Capital in 2012.
Yep.
And then there was a Senate Economics Reference Committee inquiry into forestry management investment schemes in 2026. And then lastly, there was a Senate Economics Reference Committee into Sterling Income Trust in 2022. But this is the first look at the settings more generally for managed investment schemes in over 20 years.
So what's the timetable?
Our report is due to government in the first few months of this calendar year.
So how many submissions have you received?
We have received... Do you want to...
Ongoing War Assistant Secretary, Advice Investments Branch. We're up to over 60 submissions now.
Okay, and have many submissions canvassed this concern that having a more paternalistic approach will close out avenues for people who want to get exposure to asset classes that are only the preserve of the very rich?
Yeah, so the submissions, most of the submissions that were received have been made public, so they're available for everybody to see. It's fair to say that on this issue there's a spectrum of views. There's been views expressed that those thresholds should increase. Some have suggested it should increase in line with inflation. Others have said it should stay the same, and indeed we've even had submissions that say that they're too high as they stand and they should be reduced.
Because this is not a review of managed investment schemes, is it? I mean, these have been subject to the broader reviews into the financial sector. This is a review of the wholesale retail test, isn't it?
There is a number of elements to the terms of reference. So this is one.
But what's the main focus? So
It's really about looking at whether the settings are still fit for purpose. So the thresholds is one. There are whether certain managed investment schemes should be marketed and sold to retail investors, whether the roles and obligations of responsible entities, and whether governance, compliance and risk management frameworks are appropriate, whether investor rights for people who invest in managed investment schemes are appropriate, looking at liquidity arrangements, looking at whether an insolvency regime...
Okay, but would you accept that this wholesale retail test is a key component?
It is a key component, but it's one of many.
Okay, and what are our good friends at ASIC saying to you you should do?
So ASIC submission...
ASIC submission is public. They, on this particular issue, their view, as expressed in that submission, was that the thresholds should increase in line with inflation.
Okay, and if that was to increase, then they would have a larger community to look after, in effect, wouldn't they?
There would be, relative to no change, there would be fewer people who would qualify for the whole.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I just want to come back to this because this is the key point, because effectively, if we take ASIC's view and we expose more people to a higher level of consumer protection, assuming that works, then we have a very different situation as we have today compared to what we have today. Are you saying that Treasury doesn't have a view on ASIC's enforcement record in retail financial services?
I'm saying that it's not appropriate in this forum for me. We don't provide our opinions in these forums. We provide information about the work that we're doing. So you're asking for my opinion.
I'm not asking for opinion. I'm asking for an opinion of either the Minister or of the Department about the efficacy of the law enforcement that we have in Australia in relation to the regulation of these schemes.
So, Senator, I think the evidence we've given is that we can't express an opinion on the performance of ASIC.
Okay, well, I'll ask the Minister then. Hello.
Hello, sorry, I was
just wondering whether you had a
update.
view about the quality of law enforcement in Australia in relation to retail financial services and how effective ASIC has been at protecting consumers under the arrangements that exist for retail clients.
Is the government satisfied
Yeah.
with how ASIC's performing?
That's pretty much the question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's probably a matter that's best answered by the Minister responsible directly, who works with them more directly than I do. But yes.
So you don't have a view?
No, I'm saying yes, the government is satisfied. I mean, there's always, with regulation, there's always areas that you need to improve. It's almost a continuous improvement arrangement. But I don't work directly with ASIC very often. In fact, my dealings with them are primarily sitting here at the table in estimates. So I'm saying if you wanted a more detailed view from the government, it should be answered by the Assistant Treasurer.
So that's 15 minutes there. I'll go to Senator McKim for 5. We're ready to break.